Somebody remind me to turn that sucker off, but it's over. I don't remember. Well, like I said, with the steering, they're asking you, in a positive way, not a negative. I think that's one of the problems. Well, I just did what they asked me to do. I didn't tell them to, to live in this community because there were a lot of Jewish people there. They asked me to look for property for them in Jewish communities. How about this scenario? The agent is in the conference room, talking to a walk-in. They are looking for property near the synagogue. The agent says to them and explains to them that they can't show property or give information out on that basis. So they go back in the back to the computers so they can pull up some properties in Jewish communities. They never said anything. They told them in the conference room that they couldn't do that, but they did it when they went back in the back. They found the properties. People were elated. Why? Drove them right to the house that they wanted. 2 blocks from the synagogue. So we have a problem there.
Yes.
Yeah. That person didn't have a license anymore. Because you violate these fair housing laws, you better hope they don't file a complaint with the commission. Or you're gonna have your hands full. And I'm sure Ben would be thrilled too. Questions on this? Spend a little more time necessary for the test, but so much Max, I think you would ask.
So it's verbal when you tell them that you cannot show properties based on the fresh corn front?
Yeah.
If it's verbal, how can you prove that you told them
Correct.
if they take you up, if they report you?
As per our conversation today about how I can show properties, I want to reiterate the fact that federal law and office policy does not allow me to show property or give out information on the basis of. Send them an email.
Yeah. So make it written or typed.
Yeah, or a text message. But you would do that for just about any scenario. If you called up one of your listings just to check up and they get all bent out of shape, and and then you talk to them and get everything worked out. And then you go about your day, and then you get a call from Ben that the seller had just called complaining about what you did or didn't do. Now, you have to, what documentation do you have if you do just a phone call that you did do that? But I'll give you an actual situation that happened. When you look at a sales contract, there's always a time frame for doing inspections, probably somewhere between 5 days and 15 days. If there's going to be a second deposit, it's probably 10 to 15 days. So let's assume that the number of days that you have to do inspections is 10. And the second deposit is due in 7 days. Inspection is done on day 2 with $3,000 worth of repairs and possibility of mold. Now, you know done well, in these as-is contracts, we got negotiation number 2. Because I don't think the buyer's gonna say, okay, I'll take care of that. The buyer's gonna expect the seller to do it. Which means you didn't explain to the buyer what as-is meant. The seller doesn't have to fix anything in an as-is contract. So, a buyer needs to be real careful about getting hostile over the $3,000. And I need to make sure my buyer understands that. We gotta be nice to the seller, because by contract, they have no obligation to fix anything.
But as the buyer, you could always just walk away, say you don't
Yes.
want it.
That's
Because
true.
you're negotiating chip.
Now, let's go a little farther. We're at day 7. The deposit is due by the end of the day. But they're still negotiating over the repairs. And the inspection period ends at 10 days. So that second deposit is due before the end of the inspection period. Now, you know what the buyer's gonna tell you if they're still negotiating. I'm not giving you another dime until we get this worked out. Then you have to politely explain to the buyer, if they don't come up with that deposit, they will be in default in the contract. That was my fault. I shouldn't have made the second deposit due the day or two or 3 days before the inspection period was over. I should have pushed it past the inspection period, or I should have been smart enough and taken all of it up front. And then I'll have to deal with that. They were gonna give a total of $10,000 deposit, and we're gonna give $2,000 now, and the rest of it in 10 days, or 7 days, whatever. Better off taking it all up front, and I'll have to deal with that. But here's what happened, had nothing to do with deposit. Agent puts together a transaction for 2 buyers, and reminds them that they have 10 days to do the inspections. So, to follow up, the next day she called and said, have you found an inspection company? I've got a list of 3 or 4 here. You can choose one of those. We've used them before in the company. By the way, in signature 411, we do have a list of vendors, which will be real helpful to you, and we can add to it. In other words, you work with a vendor that's not one of them, but they did a fantastic job. You want to make sure that Ben or somebody else in upper management's aware of it, because we can add them to the list once we, verify a few things. So she called second day, and they said, no, we haven't chosen one yet, but we will probably before the day's over. Now it's 4 days. She calls again. Still kind of put her off, but we're gonna do it. Day 7. They're still gonna do it. Haven't done it yet. Day 9. She calls again. And explains to them, tomorrow, the inspection period ends. And they put up a substantial deposit up front. And they said, okay, we'll take care of it. Day 11, she gets a phone call from the buyers. We just did the inspection this morning, and we want the seller to fix these items that total approximately $1,500. Now what?
It's,
SOL.
Yep. They got half their money back. Wanna know why? Because that agent couldn't verify those calls. It should have been an email to, or text message to them for each time you talk to them on that phone. Because text messages and emails, we can not only trace them, we know what they said. We don't know what they said in that phone call. We can prove that the phone call was made, but you can't prove what the conversation was about. So they used that poor agent as an excuse to negotiate half the money that they weren't entitled to. So you have to document these communications. See, you're the professional. You should have known better. And they will use that against you in a heartbeat. Most crooks are very smart.
So this will also be documented in app files?
Yeah. But
I mean, in
what
general,
I would do is, within app files, you can email.
yeah,
So I would send the email out of the app file.
right, 'cause like in Salesforce, when you actually go to a client, you meet with a client, you go in and you log all things into Salesforce, and therefore even.
Well, with the new program I had, which is called Total Brokerage, there is a CRM sitting in the front of it, where when they call in, you enter all the information. And then if it evolves to a transaction, then there's a segment of it that now deals with the documentation. Okay. Let's move ahead, if we can, to page 154. Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. I have someone who wants to rent one of my units. They are physically challenged. They are willing to pay for renovations that will allow them to enter and exit the unit without doing damage to the rest of the property. That would normally be considered the term they use as readily obtainable. But the problem you run into if you refuse to rent to them because of that, you'd be in violation. But there's another catch too for the person who is physically challenged. They have to put it back when they leave, at their expense. So there's no monetary effect on the owner, just the hassle of dealing with it. If they need a permit, who's gonna have to get the permit?
The owner.
The owner. Obviously, the permit will be obtained by a contractor who's licensed to be able to do the work. Or you gotta probably get the permit. Let me ask a question, what if you did your own work, do you need a permit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Assuming that you're doing something that will require a permit, I'm gonna do the work myself,
Of course.
I still have to have a permit?
I'd say you needed more.
Any modification?
Yeah.
But do you have to bring it to the same name, same condition, like if you leave the property?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
So if you change something Unless the owner is
Agreed.
willing to leave
Yeah,
it,
right.
it would have to be put back.
It has to be agreed. Like
See, that's why that's where the readily achievable might come into play.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily that they have to, they can, if the landlord agreed to keep it like that, they can keep it.
Yeah, right. Then we don't have a problem. I deal with the possibility of problems. If everybody agrees to everything, we wouldn't have much to talk about. But we have to understand the boundaries of what we can and can't do. And if it's not readily achievable, the seller can't be forced into agreeing to the thing. I can rent it to you, but, you know, putting in a ramp or something so you can get in the door is really not a big deal. Tearing off half the front of the unit to be able to accomplish it is another story. That's where the readily achievable comes into play, both from the standpoint of what's done to the property and the cost factor of it. At the bottom of the page 154, it talks about the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. What does this act require? Full disclosure.
Fraudulent marketing scheme.
Full disclosure of what? Land sales that occur interstate. If you will pay attention to the name tells you what it does. But read the paragraph so you can give me some big, long Julie gun. That means, you know, up north, I remember as a kid, motorhomes would come in from people selling Florida land. Swamp part they left out. What does interstate mean?
Intrastate or interstate? A different state.
Within 2 states.
Which one is?
It's right on the page. First word. What does that mean?
Two states.
That means that they're in a state where the property's not trying to sell it to them. Like the motorhomes that showed up to sell Florida land. General development. Any of you that are familiar with the history of real estate in Florida, general development. Well, some slick moves. I had a guy in class that his friend, I guess now it would be probably close to 40 years, bought a tract of land. They decided one time to go find it, because it'd been years since they bought it. And so they got the map and everything, so they're going down the road, and they'll go from a main road down to a smaller paved road. And then eventually it turned into a smaller paved road, one lane, and then it turned into dirt road. And then it turned into swamp. According to the survey, where they had to stop because you would have gone into the swamp, the corner of his property was about 100 yards down the road. Which means now the property is still not available. My question is this: does this act prevent you from buying worthless swampland? No.
No.
It makes sure that you know that you're buying useless swampland. How do I know that? The word disclosure. So I have to tell them everything about that property. And they have X number of days to say no. But that report they're talking about basically tells them that at this point, and for the foreseeable future, property will not be available for use. Can't build a house. Why? Can't get water. Even though there's water all over the place. And number two, you can't put in a septic field.
So that's what happened in Ocala then, when individuals who retired from the military decided to pay into a community, and the community was built by a developer. The community was all well, nice and good, but it was in the middle of farmland, and the Publix and Winn-Dixie's and stuff was 7 to 15 miles away. So that's how they did that?
Yep. Because the whole idea here is if we disclose what the deal is, and you're still willing to accept it, like I said, it isn't to prevent you from doing something stupid. It's to make sure you know you're about to do something stupid.
And how will they know then, for example, like that particular group, they didn't know that they were gonna continue developing to raise it from a startup community, which the community itself was nice and everything else, but the distance between going to grocery shopping and regular amenities never came to fruition.
Well, depending on whether this act has been violated, number one, depends on if they're doing it interstate. If they're somewhere else selling this, and number two, that they had any control over that. So when you look at the reports and stuff they do, they have to be very careful. They can advertise the fact that there's gonna be the Publix and everything, but if they are not the ones building it, they have to be smart enough to do what? Make sure that the people buying it understand that they can't guarantee that this is ever gonna happen. So it would depend on what information they were given. If they were given full disclosure with all that stuff, different story. Then, you take your lumps. If not, you got a class action lawsuit.
Does this imply for, land as well?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question. What's the name of this law?
Land.
What's the second word?
Land sales, yeah.
Okay, just check.
Well, under.
Well's a deep subject.
Do you know Hidden Lakes, Country Club, where the arsenal levels are too high, so they can't build? That's why I was asking. People have been-
But also understand, this is interstate sales. This is somebody in Ohio selling swampland in Florida. This doesn't apply if you're not selling it out of state. But then if people from out of state are coming to look at it, now you're out of state. The one note that I want you to highlight and star is at the end of line 36. It says, ILSA, which is the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act, is administered by Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Now, when did this come into effect?
Probably 70s or 80s. You'll notice on the top of 155, they talk about the property report. It's done for properties where the developer has 24 or more lots.
25.
And you see that you've got a 7-day window to decide whether you want it or not. But it still goes back to the same idea, it's full disclosure. I need to know everything they know about this property, what you can and can't do with it. Once I know that, then it's up to you as the individual buyer as to whether you're willing to take the risk. When it's not disclosed to you, that's where the problem comes in. Yes?
It's about disclosure, not in-state, but interstate, but if you have representing a seller and it says in a contract as is, right? Is it contingency
You have to explain what as is.
in a contract? And is it a contingency with what the inspections show?
No,
So basically, if he tells you, you have to tell you have to disclose that.
if I was gonna sell my lot,
Right.
I could sell it as is. But I gotta make you aware of what I know about it, which is, for the foreseeable future, it's useless land, it can't be used.
Well, but let's say about structure now, let's say that you didn't.
Now, are you talking resale, or are you talking about original purchase from the developer?
No, I'm talking about resale. So let's say.
You
that-
talking about resale?
I'm t-
Okay,
So let's say that,
then this is not applicable.
right, that's why I said, it's to do with disclosure, but I'm going a little bit back to.
An as-is contract used to mean, I didn't have to tell you anything. If you were buying it as is, you got whatever you got. But you already know that things that are material facts, which is anything that would affect the value of that property, must be disclosed by the owner.
So the owner disclosed to you and he said, that's the things you have, but you have to disclose it in a listing or to the potential buyer? Because let's say you didn't know there is a leak on the roof, and suddenly, and it's as is. They bring the inspection,
Yeah.
and he said there is.
Well, the seller should have already told the buyer there's a hole in the roof.
No, but he didn't know.
He didn't know it?
He didn't know, the inspection discovered it,
Well,
but
in other words, it never leaked.
never did, yeah, but they found it in the inspection that there is some problem there.
Yeah.
So, who is the responsibility now?
In an as-is contract, buyer.
The buyer?
If the seller did not know, and it wasn't readily observable, and you sold it to the buyer as is, unless the buyer can prove you're lying, and you did know about it,
But they can put it.
it's not the seller's obligation.
But they can put in a contract agreement upon contingency of inspection.
Yeah, so,
Then you protect yourself.
well, then you change it, you can't change the question and expect to have the same answer.
I would never buy a Z's then,
Why?
because there is another problem as a Z's. I mean.
What problem?
Right now I'm selling a house,
Yeah?
and there is like about, because a lot of friends the last month, never had a problem with the roof, it's brand new roof. Suddenly I see like a sputter, the buyer saw it yesterday, came to the house, the buyer, and he pointed to the listing agent. I didn't know about it.
Was it readily observable?
No, it just came recently because of all those heavy rains by the
Yeah.
gutters.
And his new roof?
The roof is like about 5 years old.
That's not new.
Oh, okay, but it's not like old.
Not new.
No, it's not old.
If you tell me there's a new refrigerator because you replaced it 6 months ago, I want a new refrigerator when I close, installed in the house.
Well, it says.
Because understand that new means you haven't turned it on. You haven't even taken it out of the box. You take it out of the box, it's used.
As is new, you can write as is new, the appliance as new, as new.
If you say they're new, they should never have been taken out of the box. If they've been plugged into the wall, they are not new. And I know someone that had to buy an air conditioning unit that was put in 6 months ago. Because the agent put down new AC. The buyer said, it's not new. My contract says I get a new one.
Could you say like new?
So the seller had to show up with it. Actually, guess who showed up with it? Agents.
Yay.
Because that shouldn't happen. Because the agents know better.
So you put the length of time that you can be installed.
Well, of course.
6 months old.
I can't say it's new if it ain't new.
Right.
Recently replaced.
Could you say like new?
Sounds that mean.
Exactly, nobody knows what it is, but it's like new.
It's like new.
It's like it in yesterday.
That's it.
Almost like
It's like being pregnant.
Almost. How's it?
Now, but again, I wanna get off of this topic and move on with this interstate land sales. It is for land sales. by the developer, not resale of those lots down the road. So we're talking about two different things. Well, I'll make sure, I mean, this question was a valid one, but it didn't relate to what's on the page.
What is closed, that's what I want to know.
Have you bought property before?
Yeah,
You have a contract? Which contract do you use?
I put it, all is contentious. I always end
What's an
up,
as-is contract?
few of them do as is, and I said, I give myself a grace period of time after the inspection to back up. I add it up, I just.
It's already there, you don't have to do that. If you use a as-is contract, it already has it, all you have to do is put the number in.
That's what I did, I put the number, the time,
Right,
yeah.
but the contract itself already includes
Right, but
the
they can,
escape clause.
they can change the dates, the times.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to another topic. On 155, the Florida Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. First note, I must always make sure that the landlord and/or tenant gets a copy of the most current version of the Landlord and Tenant Act when they lease property. Now, this applied to leasing this building. Would this apply to this building being leased?
Yes.
How many of you say yes? Raise your hand. Now, tell me what the second word is.
Residential.
Residential.
See, you're developing this disease. It'll go into full bloom when you get the license. It's called the lack of ability to read. And apparently, the understanding of the English language. I can't believe that you sat there, honestly sat there, and told me that this law would apply to this building, when it says what? Residential.
Well, I thought Ben sleep
You,
is.
see, that's a problem, you think too much. There are two parts to the Landlord and Tenant Act. There is a non-residential part, which is not part of the discussions of this class. But if you went in and looked up the Landlord and Tenant Act and the statutes, part 1 would be non-residential, part 2 is residential. So it's not, there isn't an act that deals with non-residential, but they split them in different parts. Why? Because there's a major difference between the two. So the requirements and stuff are different. Why does it say on line 13, under Florida law, a person must be at least 18 years old to enter into a rental agreement?
You have to be 18 to sign anything?
Why?
Legally.
Oh, statute says that the ability to be a party to a contract, you have to be at least 18 years old. Which means that if you have a minor as one of the participants in the contract, that minor could cause that contract to become null and void. Let's start with line 12, bracket to the bottom of the page. Continuing on the first 8 lines of the next page. The statute for this Florida Residential Landlord and Tenant Act is Chapter 83, whereas 475 is the statute that regulates real estate licensees. So there is a particular statute. It is 11 pages long for residential. What we do is we take the lease and we attach the landlord and tenant act to it. So between the lease and the 11 pages of the landlord and tenant, the lease is 18 pages long. 4 times or even 5 times in the lease, it specifically makes reference to the fact that the landlord and tenant act is attached to the lease. It is extremely important that you make sure that your landlord and tenant have a copy of the landlord and tenant act, but you're only responsible for the side you're working with. So if you only have the landlord or you only have the tenant, that's your only responsibility. The other agent should be taking care of that. Here's the reason. Once that lease is signed and that tenant moves in, my job's over. If I make them aware of the guidelines that regulate their rent relationship. That's called the landlord-tenant act. By giving them a copy of it, you've made them aware of what they need to know about how to handle their relationship with each other. So they call me up and they got a problem, they called the wrong person. If it's a legal issue, they need to get legal advice. If it's a condition of, the refrigerator's not working, and I can't get a hold of the landlord, I can't help you. Not my job. And within the statute, it tells the tenant what to do if the landlord's not living up to their end of the bargain. So there's two sides to the law. There's the tenant's obligations and rights, and then there's the landlord's obligation and rights. The idea of the Landlord and Tenant Act is to create what they call an equitable relationship between the landlord and tenant. In other words, basically laying out what each one should expect of the other. Now, we know that, especially in annual leases, you typically are looking at upfront of first, last, and 1 month security. The question is, what do I do with that advance rent? That's what you see in that last paragraph. Or actually, see the 1, 2, 3, 4, or the 1, 2, 3, excuse me. You have 3 options as the landlord. You can put it in a non-interest bearing account, or you can put it into an interest bearing account, and it tells you how much of the interest that you have to pay them. Or you can, and the third thing is post a bond in the amount of what?
Dale, I have a question.
Mhm.
Whose responsibility, as with the Disability Act, if the client or?
Customer.
I'm sorry, customer, is disabled, mentally or blind, is that our responsibility
Nope.
as an agent to
No.
provide them?
No.
So they can understand?
No. My job is to buy and sell real estate. Not to deal with those issues. They're not my issue to deal with. I'll be as accommodating as I can, but I'm not responsible for them. So the third thing you can do is post that bond, pay the tenant 5% simple interest, and you can actually use the money. Of course, it better show up in the account when it's time to reimburse. Because lasting security are advance rent, which means the landlord is not technically legally have rights to those, even though the landlord will hold on to them. That's why they have to put it in an account. Well, that's why I advised the tenant to take pictures before and after. So we don't have that issue.
Still doesn't really work.
No. But there may be bases where they have to. Now, My landlord's in Cleveland. So the lapse in security, let's assume that the first month went towards commissions. So lapse in security now need to be sent to the landlord in Cleveland. Now, do we have a problem?
Yeah,
Supposed to be.
Because it's supposed to be where?
In the Florida.
Florida Bank.
Well, he banks with Bank of America in Cleveland. Which means what?
There's a branch here in Florida.
There's a couple of them here in Florida.
Yeah.
Which means the courts could get a hold of that money if they needed to. That's why it has to be in a Florida account. If a dispute comes up over it and winds up in court, how does the courts get their hands on the money if the money is in a financial institution that only exists in Cleveland? Now, but he's in Cleveland. What does he do? He goes to a branch that he works with in Cleveland and creates an account. And you do what? You deposit it, you keep a copy of the deposit, and you send a copy to him. So that you now have information within the file that shows that the account was created and you made a deposit, and you send a copy of the deposit to the landlord. However, we are not collectors of rent. The landlord in Cleveland's having a problem with a tenant not paying. I don't stick my nose in that. Keep my nose out of that. Why? It is between the landlord and the tenant, and it is a legal matter that we do not have the right to advise. So you start, see, that's why we give them the landlord-tenant act. It tells them their rights. So I'm not practicing law. That doesn't mean I won't try to help them if they call me. What do I do? Now, the odds are, if it's because the landlord's not living up to, or the tenant's not living up to, the answer's gonna be what? You probably wanna seek legal advice. Because at that point, they're asking me to interpret the situation that's going on and what to do about it. Not my job.
So we would, you think they would, we wouldn't get in trouble if we said, well, try a management company or something like that? Or-
No, if you're sending them to someone who has the capability of helping them. Now, in that situation, unless the property management company is managing that property, it wouldn't do them any good. So it's either the landlord, a property management company that's handling that property, or legal. And you need an attorney. It depends. The 1, 2, 3, about the 3 ways to handle that account, how to start. On page 155, the 3 ways that you have of control of handling the advancements and deposits. You're not going to see landlords putting that in interest-bearing accounts, because the amount of interest that's being earned is not enough to cover what you have to give them. So it winds up costing you money to put it in an interest-bearing account. Plus, the amount of accounting work that has to be done, because if it's generating interest, you have to be able to prove how much interest was generated and how much you're entitled to and how much the tenant's entitled to. On the top of the next page, notice that this does not apply to 5 or 4 or fewer units. So if I'm renting out my condo, I don't have the obligations there. It says, you know, if it's 5 or more units, must give tenants written notice of the advance rent or security deposit either in the lease agreement or within 30 days after receipt of the advance rent security deposit. The notice must be given in person or by mail to the tenant. And in the Landlord and Tenant Act, it tells you how you're supposed to send notices. It goes on to say the notice must indicate the name and address of the depository where the advance rent or security deposit is being held. Or it must state that the landlord has posted a surety bond as provided by law. The notice must also indicate whether the tenant is entitled to interest on the deposit. This act also requires that notice include the following disclosure. What they're talking about is what you see in parentheses. Which we'll talk about in just a little bit, it's in the notes also. But they stuck that to show you that a lot of the things that, how things need to be done in certain situations are actually written into the statute. That's why we give them a copy. Because if the landlord wants to lay a claim on the security deposit, the act even tells them what verbiage to use. It tells them how long they have, which we'll look at just a little bit. Because the idea, it was set up to deal with issues between the landlord and tenant. Obviously, one is the handling of money. Now, at the bottom of page 156, it talks about the broker being property manager. Let's put a bracket around lines 9 through 23. And then there's one sentence I want to highlight. It starts in the middle of line 13, where it says the deposits and advance rents are trust funds, and as such must be deposited into the broker's escrow account by the end of the third business day at receipt of the funds, trust funds. But we don't have an escrow account for rental monies. So the way we handle the monies are different than most companies. And no, I'm not gonna go into it now. I think you can see why majority of brokers today don't have escrow accounts. They may own the title company where the escrow money is put, but they're not directly responsible for it. To me, I don't see anything good about escrow money. Only bad things can happen from our perspective. Because if I'm holding on to somebody else's money and the two of them start fighting over it, I'm like a monkey in the middle. And if I'm handling the escrow money, I've got a statute that tells me my options as how I handle a dispute. As you saw when we talked about escrow, as the pages went on, it got worse. Imagine having to be the person in the company of 600 agents doing close to 5,000 total transactions each year and handling an escrow account. We probably need anywhere from 2 to 3 people to handle it. I watched our accountants in here as it is now, and they don't have to deal with escrow. Because the title company deals with it. She would probably shoot herself if she didn't deal with it. Now, we've also already talked about the idea of if the broker does have an escrow account for management, they can keep up to how much of their own money in the account? Right, 5,000. So that we've already talked about. But the point they're making here is if I'm playing property management and I'm gonna hold on to that last advance rents and security deposit for the landlord, then I'm holding on to somebody else's
Money.
money, which means it would have to go in an escrow account. The minute that money is not a commission, a bonus, or a transaction fee, it shouldn't be made out to the company. Simple rule of thumb, there's only 3 types of checks you should see with the company's name on it. That's commissions, transaction fee, and/or bonuses. All right, let's go to the bottom of page 157.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
About the landlord-tenant act.
Yeah.
So my dad's renting out one of his condos, but he's doing it himself. Is
Right.
it, does he have to give the act to the tenant?
Have to give what?
Does he have to give the, as the landlord, give the act, a copy of the act?
No.
To the tenant?
No.
So that the tenant never gets the act?
Right. But the tenant obviously knows that he can go on the website where the statutes are and get a copy of it. That's why it's a good thing to do transactions by yourself. Not work with a licensed professional who knows the things you should have. The money you save can be quickly lost because you don't know what your obligations or rights are. But that 11 pages clearly tells you what your rights are and what your obligations are. And all this chapter here is excerpts out of that landlord-tenant act with some extra explanation. All right, we said that they were trying to create an equitable relationship between the landlord and the tenant, which means that we have to know what the landlord's rights and obligations are, and the same for the tenant. On page 157, starting with line 1, which is about 2/3 of the way down the page, let's put a bracket line around lines 1 through 16. Is the landlord obligated to provide air conditioning?
If it says air conditioning, yeah.
Based upon the statute, is the landlord responsible for providing air conditioning? The answer is no. However, if air conditioning is part of what comes with the unit, is the landlord obligated to make sure that it is in good working condition?
Yes.
By the way, all the things that they say the landlord's supposed to take care of, they can make you pay for it.
Take it out of you.
It's part of the lease. Because one section of the lease is check boxes. One side says landlord, one side says tenant, and then different categories, like lawn maintenance, filters for the air conditioning, furniture, appliances. Majority of things are gonna be whose responsibility?
Then the tenant.
Landlord. Only a few things, for the most part, are gonna be tenants.
Sometimes they give you a dollar amount if it's more than 50, so.
It's typical that they do that.
Yeah,
It's what the lease calls major or minor
yeah.
maintenance or repairs or replacement. And typically, it's probably somewhere around $100. That anything under $100 is the tenant's job to fix or replace. If it's over that 100, then it's the landlord's obligation. to fix or, repair or replace whatever that item is. But again, not something that I have to remember. All I have to do is read the statute. It's all right there. I would probably suggest that you read it. How many of you are renting a unit now? Anybody renting? Did you work through a real estate agent? No.
Yes.
Did they give you a copy of the landlord intent act? Were they working with this company?
No.
Okay, good. Because you will have agents out there that tell you it's not required that they give you a copy. However, if you read the lease that we're allowed to use, it says it 4 or 5 times. Which tells me that agent that's arguing with our agent that they don't have to give them a copy, obviously, can't read. So the disease obviously is advanced for that person. It could be deadly. It's called revocation.
So rental community also have to give it, when it's like by developer. If it's a rental community,
What about it?
you go to the office and they're renting you, they also have to give you there.
They don't have to give you a copy of the landlord
They
intent.
don't have? No.
Different ballgame. Top of page 158. We've got the tenant's obligations. As the landlord, there are times where I may need to have access to the unit to inspect the premises. I have the right to do that. Why? Because it is mine. It says make necessary or agreed upon repairs, decorations, alterations, or improvements. Supply agreed upon services every Thursday. Every third Thursday, the pest control guy shows up. So the tenant would be obligated to make sure that we'll have access, or if I've got a master key, the tenant understands that on that day, they will use that master key to enter the unit for pest control. You refusing it means that all the roaches run to your unit when they spray the units around you. Don't laugh. That's exactly what happened. Or bed bugs or whatever else is there. So that's why the statute is gonna insist upon you making sure that the landlord with reasonable notice. Now, reasonable notice. What's reasonable notice? At least 12 hours. It says it on line 21. Unless it's an emergency. And probably one of the most typical emergencies that really is an emergency is hot water heaters.
Any kind of leak.
A hot water heater leaks. The unit it's sitting on doesn't take much damage. The damage happens to the units below. And the tenants in the unit below are from France, and they're only here January, February, March. Now, generally speaking, if they wanted to get in, they would have to give them notice. But I think maybe under that circumstance, I have the right to protect my property. So therefore, I could enter that unit without their permission or notice. How do I know that? Because the statute says so. Now, leases can end good, meaning that the tenant stays there for the year and leaves, or it can go bad. They stop paying and won't get out. Let's talk about the good situation. On line 22, it talks about vacating premises. At the end of the lease, if the landlord is not gonna lay a claim on the deposit or any part thereof, they have 15 days to return it to the tenant. If they're gonna lay a claim on it, and like I said, within the Landlord and Tenant Act, it tells you the wording to use. You have 30 days. What if they don't do it within the 30 days? Then they have to give back. I had a guy in class. Landlord, he wanted the security deposit back because he'd taken care of the unit. And he needed it to go down the road. And landlord didn't do anything. I said, at this point, let's wait him out. Day 31, he had a friend of his who was an attorney, send him a letter. 2 weeks later, check showed up at the attorney's office. Because he used the act as a basis for it.
Did that include attorney fees?
Probably not. If you get your security deposit back, you probably should be happy. That's why everybody needs to have an attorney as a friend. Just like you need a friend that has a real estate license.
There you go.
Now, below those two bullets where it talks about vacating premises, the 15 and 30 days, star. And then on line 39, it says the Florida Landlord and Tenant Act relieves brokers of the duty to notify FREC of disputes regarding the security deposits or advance rent. Section 8349 Florida statute, which is the Landlord and Tenant Act, provides that the brokers holding security deposits and advance rent may disperse the funds from the rental escrow account without complying with the commission's escrow dispute and notification process, provided the broker has fully complied with the Landlord and Tenant Act. Good place to stop. Let's take a break, come back and continue.
Usually,
The attendance, yeah. I don't know where it is, we need the attendance. And anybody that left food here? Overnight? Please make sure that that door stays closed. Screw up the air conditioning.
I left it over there.
How you doing? I'm good. How's your week today? Stormy out. Good.
I almost died of thirst. Water in the gutter.
I'm good, yourself?
Doing great. Dude, I checked out on that website.
Okay, cool. What do you think?
It's pretty good. I was gonna ask you, what was your, I don't know if you listened to the album or not yet. What was your?
Oh, out of all our songs?
Yeah.
My favorite one is, I would say, AK.
Okay, yeah.
That's probably what
I have to go back and listen to it.
Yeah, I like the acoustic one. Her very, well, see, she was in the Power of the Day competition.
Okay.
She was, she did spoken word
Okay.
in school. She did the prelude to the debate squad.
Okay.
And so,
You know what I'm gonna do?
those are the kind of things that she liked to do.
Okay, yeah.
Okay? So then, when she started doing that poetry and poetry slam competitions, and then she got into, again, going back to her,
Yeah.
that acoustic sound.
Yeah.
I like those type of things more, where you can actually hear the rhyme pentameter, the more of the, like, for example, the one, NPR.
Okay, yeah. Give me just 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what's up?
And so
We're back.
when Paul was working, then
notion that there was someone from Florida coming in to sell land in Florida. And they went and they signed the contract. And the next morning, my mother said to my father, I want out. I don't want this contract, I don't think it's good. I'm not happy with it. She was very looking. And remember she called her, and she got the money back, but they tried to pressure her a little bit to keep it, but I remember my mother was very strong.
Okay.
What part of New York?
Yeah.
I lived in Suffolk County.
Yeah.
I went to school. I lived in Deer Park.
I'm from Comac.
Yeah.
Look at that.
I went there for a year, to
Yeah.
the University of New York.
Oh, I did too.
Really?
Yeah, I graduated from there. This was before, the medical center. I mean, we're talking years ago. But yeah.
Time to
Yeah,
stay
I was
on
able
the
to have
It was in mid-70s.
Me too.
Yeah.
Look at that. Wow.
What?
Yeah, have a good evening.
You leaving?
I left there in 70.
You gotta go?
And I graduated December 75.
So have a good
See
weekend.
that?
So
Yes, you
See
too.
you Monday.
I went for education. I was a teacher.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, look at that. They still had dirt, well, I remember they still had a lot of, they were still building them.
Yeah.
It was-
I was in, I forgot which squad I was in. The one shaped like peanuts. I forgot the name of it.
Where's
It
the
was
sign?
English.
In his cast around?
Sign sheets over there?
My
Well,
community,
let's
they
see,
tell
movie.
me.
Sanger. I was on Sanger.
very friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, the front now, yeah. Or-
Yeah.
I really love that school.
It was beautiful.
Yeah. I haven't seen it for many years, but I was back, we're down here all the time. But I remember seeing the campus at the medical center being built. I was so happy and so,
Mm-hmm.
they really developed it quite a bit. I gotta watch what
So,
they do.
my dad had a sister in the same church. She grew up in a
Anybody want this?
Okay, I got, oh, no thanks.
Did you all sign this?
I got, laughing cow. She was all boys in the park in the South Bronx. Wow. I'm like, well, so one of the boys went to Harvard. And he got her into Harvard, she graduated from Harvard at 50 years old. And then she ended up teaching at Stanford. Can you believe it?
What did she teach?
She was in charge of that,
All right.
that program for disadvantaged students.
Oh, how wonderful. Wow, wow, wow.
No, not yet.
As a matter of fact, her son Jeff, he has that school in Harlem that takes signals in the air, like 100% success rate.
Okay.
Harlem Renaissance.
That's it, Renaissance sounds right, yeah.
Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
they-
Hey, no worries, like, for example, here,
Wow.
Yeah.
to the right up on,
Yeah, I was
But one of the concepts was to go back, in the
Yeah.
50 and
She
she
started
started
at the Brown Community
the baggage
College,
claim.
and worked her way up.
Okay.
and
baggage claim, the EPA
Jesse
came out.
Yeah.
And for her
left Harvard,
acoustic vocals, as well as you may hear,
got her in.
You see, she was smart too. I started at community school.
keyboarding.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I should have done that.
My parents offered to put me in a private school.
Kind of throwback to,
And it was a lot of money. And I thought to myself, how do you do that?
called Stray Cats.
To get
I have
the
it.
car. To
Stray
me,
Cats,
that's what I
they
wanted.
had
I got the car and
they
people
used
to
the
work.
bass,
And
Okay.
I went to the
you know,
school.
real,
Yeah, upright.
And then I got my
upright bass,
course. And they were smart at that time, because I made sure all my credits were transferable, which they did. I only had one petition against.
Yeah.
So that has the sound, is a throwback.
Yeah, no, I
I
hear
have
it.
to
It's
say,
really,
it's all a good
really
school.
genre that she's. Yeah, I'm actually.
One was a college in Oakville, and there were a couple of them
Okay.
over in Nassau.
On Saturday.
And I just said no. I said, right. I said no.
meeting with
And
him was
it
so
wa-
So I know.
Right, exactly.
So you booked that, you do that, okay, so
And
you're
so what it was.
Yeah, so that being said,
It didn't make
what
sense.
I'm
So
interested in
then I
for
said, well,
her
let me
is trying
work
to
for
get
you.
her out here.
Yeah.
You go right over.
Oh, like in Lewis minutes?
It's like having in South
And
Florida,
that's-
for
and that's
example,
what
you come to like,
And-
Blue
and
Martini,
the transfer
or go to
process was
the,
wonderful.
the,
It
called
really
the,
was.
FAU,
But I remember how
Fall Slam,
Okay.
company,
where they
I was
have,
trying to figure out how old I was at the
music,
time,
when
and
the new
I can't
students,
remember.
freshman students come
But I
in,
think
all
it's
come in,
before
get
the
great ground for football season, especially now that they have a
Maybe
new
right around that
coach for
time.
this year at FAU. And
He
then
came home,
there's a venue coming up
They went to this
with,
meeting and they were kind of excited, and my mother woke up and said, absolutely, now we will do this. And she was ahead of her time, I have to say that.
Neil Soul Explosion down there in
She
Miami.
worked when she was very young, she
Miami,
lived on her own, and she was a survivor.
With the Heat playing.
I love it.
What's the name? What's the name?
I don't know, I'm maybe there.
American Airlines.
Well,
American Airlines.
yeah, American Airlines, yeah.
As long as she
So,
could.
if we can get in on those two venues, that'd be perfect for us.
Gotcha.
You know, that way I don't have to keep flying out of here.
Yeah.
To
I
Oklahoma,
know what my mom
Texas,
sold
or
for
California,
someone
or New York,
in
to see her, and then we can get it to come
I
down
was
this way.
living in the Bronx, yeah.
But, those are the things, so if you know people, just forward it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when she
I'm still in the
retired,
area, but I'm
She
actually
built a house
don't work
in
in a studio.
Oh, how nice.
Okay.
How beautiful.
So because some of the lots were
I'd have to
not
ask
in
to see
like close proximity to the rest of the community, they would switch.
suitable. Have you contacted FAU?
They say, okay, if you're ready to use
I
the
talked
lot
to
now, and
two
it's not really
persons,
such a good area.
I call them two
You can
decision
choose from
makers at
where-
FAU,
Yeah.
one in the
Nice.
youth department.
Okay.
But at least they were
One
reasonable
person
about it, I mean, that
in
was
the,
good. I don't know if.
But they,
They call their-
you know, they,
their bid county program,
they committed
Well,
fraud against
like
FREC1.
anything else, you have
Because the
to,
price of the houses that they built on the land was
not only
over
got see, they
high.
got to see the product live,
Yeah.
okay? And so that's up to her and her
They steered you away
coordinator.
from
Now sometimes
streets
you're
where
not
the other
here,
builders
okay?
were, that's
I
what,
mean, they
that's
see their
what
work.
happened to us.
Now it's a matter of,
Because
hey, can
after
she
she
come live?
already picked
How
out
big of a
everything
scale
and
can she
signed
go?
everything and
Well,
went down
her most
there,
recent tour, there
that's
was
when
three
you
of
went on
them.
streets that had all the
So
other
three individuals
buildings,
make,
trees,
to make an actual
that
full,
had really nice houses.
set. If you run an hour set with this person, an hour set with this one,
Well,
now you actually have a full venue to provide. So that's what she, that's where she's at right now.
Time attorney,
Well,
really,
even like,
really
we spoke to
Gary
Morgan,
examining the
and,
case.
I just,
and
you know how
when I
his
think
last
of
name
work,
was spelled?
like on top of the background, he's
I
doing.
think it's
And
regular
rap are
Gary, I'm not sure.
Yeah, rap is different than
J?
G.
sports.
Yeah.
Because there are hookah bars, there are places where they actually
That was my
have
father's.
names.
I don't know what that was in English.
LA,
It wasn't all that, it was not a common name anymore.
They actually have the venue, it's not as prevalent here. So that they have,
And all
but
of it, I
again,
think that
her genre is Erica Badu.
usually come down to her place and something like.
She can, she has
And they got
a.
stock certificates or something.
Today I made a mistake and I tried the I-9.
Sounds like. Plus she's in school.
Yeah.
She's in school, she's, you know, she works on, you know, probably a year, she works on her PhD. So a lot of what she's doing for her
The first
research,
time it
she's
happened, I
doing
went
those emotionals and those data, she's driven, she throws that into her research.
Yeah, I was reading, there's, I don't know where, but the police on the website, there's different people that have used stuff.
Right, NPR, current, yes.
So it's really cool, because she, I guess it started out as a music person, she just bring the hood.
Yeah.
What I understood.
Well, she's always been in music, okay, when she was in middle school, she did, both, band and orchestra.
Hydrated,
She was a professional side of band, but she also played the violin and viola. And then, of course, she also played sports. She was a taekwondo first, and competition taekwondo, then on skater.
I'm at class. I went at class and that's okay. Well, it's, we're on vacation. We're on break.
Although, we still have to explore.
I finished.
Okay.
Therefore, keep them busy,
Oh.
and do things that are
And I
constructive.
won't
Yeah.
get home until.
Yeah.
So that's what her.
Well, I'm excited. I'm gonna give it some more listen.
I'm just all over the place.
And she says, I'm not going on.
So you know.
And the link, her email's on there.
She got
You
what she
always
wanted.
shoot out to her, okay? Thanks,
If you don't ask, you don't get.
Well, I can different cars there when I get home, but I don't wanna go and mix it up.
I lived on some,
No, you do bring the meat patties? No curry goat?
Not unless you wanna go to sleep.
Well, you know.
Maybe not.
It'll feel good.
Oh, I see.
I don't know, empanadas and meat patties, you know, they're just like, I eat them like on a regular.
Yeah. I'm already struggling, that will put me over.
Anybody that has, sorry,
I mean, I like it.
just stay there.
And we have different kinds of people in the building. It's nice.
Oh, it is.
In the city, I work with a different. I was actually talking about this somebody.
Oh, my goodness.
Talking about this.
See, that kind of, yeah, no, that kind of sleep. Oh, no, that would be.
Anybody else out there?
It wouldn't even be a start. Boom. That, you try to start. No.
Okay. Let's continue. At the top of page 159, you have all the important dates in regard to the Landlord and Tenant Act. Been dealing with deposits. Would there be potential grounds to terminate a lease that had nothing to do with the fact that you were paying the rent? Because the most obvious reason why a lease would be terminated would be people not paying the rent. But there are other things. What if the landlord doesn't live up to their responsibilities? What's the process? Obviously, if either party's not doing what they agreed to do, it's grounds for termination. If you'll notice, it says there on page 159, starting on line 1, it says termination of rental agreements by the tenant. Landlord's not doing what they're supposed to do. What would you do initially? You've already called them, and they're not seeming to be responding. What do you do? That basically says what? Non-compliance. How long do they have to do something about it?
7 days.
7 days. What happens after the 7th day? Could be grounds for the tenant to do what? Terminate the contract. So they call you up and ask you what you should do.
Refer to your landlord and tenant agreement.
I did. I'm not sure what I can do or not do. Can you help me out? And the answer is, sure, I can help you out. I'll send you the name of 3 good attorneys who deal with rental situations. But anything else that comes out of my mouth can get me in trouble.
Right.
You can't guide them and tell them what they should do. You can refer them back to the Landlord and Tenant Act, or recommend that they seek legal advice. But it's very tempting to want to do what? To help them. Well, you could do this, or you could do that. Mm-mm. Even if you're 99% right, that 1% can get you in big trouble.
Are there attorneys in the vendor list that you're
Yes.
talking about?
Yep. That list is growing as far as all the different categories of people. Because you realize in a transaction, once you have a signed contract, the whole world gets involved in your transaction. You know, generally speaking, you're only dealing with another agent, the supplier, and your seller. Until we have a signed contract. and then the whole world shows up. To me, I become a coordinator, keeping track of what's happened with the title company, the mortgage person, the inspections, repairs, whatever it may be. To me, there's when my job gets hard. It's easy to get a contract, it's easy to get listed. Where it gets tough is when you now have to coordinate all these people, appraisers, underwriters, who are the actual people that decide whether you get a loan, not that loan officer you're talking to. So, one thing I want to know about my loan officer, what kind of relationship does he have with the underwriters? If he doesn't have a good relationship with the underwriters, he's not going to get the underwriters to overlook something, or let something slide that they may not normally slide. Well, you know what? If the person that I'm talking to can affect my business, I had better be smart enough to build a relationship with them. I'm not asking them to do anything illegal, because obviously that's not a smart move. It also talks about, on line 12, in those cases in which the tenant does not desire to terminate the rental agreement, but does want to correct a landlord's noncompliance, the law provides alternative courses of procedure. Which again means that this is coming out of the Landlord and Tenant Act. If the dwelling unit is habitable despite the landlord's failure to comply, the tenant may remain in the occupancy of the premises, and the law states that the rent may be reduced by a court in proportion to the loss of rental value caused by the failure to comply. If the dwelling unit is rendered untenable owing to landlord's failure, the tenant may not be liable for rent during the period the premises remains untenable, if the court agrees with the tenant's assertion. Do you see the underlying theme here? Where are you gonna wind up?
Court.
In court. Hopefully, they will follow the guidelines of the Landlord and Tenant Act and resolve whatever the issue is. It goes on to say, this is a departure from the requirement of non-residential leases, under which the landlord has no obligation to repair damaged premises unless the obligation is specifically contained in the lease agreement. Then it talks about termination of the rental agreement by the landlord. The tenant has guests in the unit. Like he's got 5 friends living in the unit with him. Walk into some of these rental properties at colleges and see how many people are in there.
Right.
I had a guy in class that had a friend, when his friend was in college, he rented a 3-bedroom apartment and sublet it out to 8 of his friends at $200 a month. So he was making a profit on the landlord, until the landlord found out. And basically, you got about 7 days to get rid of those people. Or face eviction. You also have a possible problem with health codes. With that many people in a unit. If I was going to give a notice of non-compliance to the tenant, can I just slap it on the door?
Yes.
The answer is yes. Why? Because the statute says so. probably would want to send or take along a witness. Probably want to whip out the phone and take a picture. I mean, we got tools today we didn't have 10 years ago. But documentation is the name of the game. What if the tenant's not paying rent?
3-day notice. 3 days.
What's the first thing you have to do?
3 days notice.
Give them a notice that they have 3 days to pay. In other words, you can't just start eviction proceedings. Basically, they're giving the tenant what? A grace period. 3 days. I had a gal in class that worked for a property management company. And, obviously, you have to get the payment there before the end of that 3rd day, or you're gonna get penalized.
Charge your fee.
They had a slit in the door with a box. She said, on the night of the 3rd day, she said that box would fill up. Which was kinda nice of the property management company to do that. Because they'd come rolling in on that 3rd day after work. There would be the checks going in there. So Tuesday morning was, the next day was a pretty busy day for the people in the office. Now they had to process all those checks.
I have a question.
Shoot.
Community where I live at now. One time, the office was broken into and somebody stole a bunch of the, because they used to have a little slip box. Someone actually broke in and stole a bunch of those checks. Once it's put in there, is that the office's responsibility or is that still the tenant's responsibility?
It would be the office's responsibility. But you would have to provide them information about the check.
Okay.
I don't know how far they're gonna get with checks. If it's cash, that's a different story. Ultimately, we can be at a bad place in a lease. And the tenant is either not complying or is not paying rent. So it's time to remove them. What's the first thing I do?
Through the court.
Nope.
Give them notice,
What do you do?
give them written
Give
notice.
notice.
Give them written notice. I'm on page 160,
At the top.
starting line 8, says eviction requirements. So now the tenant doesn't pay. Landlord has to go to court and file a complaint. And then the tenant is given X amount of time to respond. The tenant, if the tenant would respond, the next step is gonna be what? Another trip to the courts. That's trip to. Now, if the tenant does show up, the judge is gonna have to decide who wins. Assuming that the landlord wins, what happens next? An eviction order is issued by the courts. Now, would that mean that the tenant would have to be put on notice?
Yes.
That they have 24 hours to vacate? And how does that get to the tenant?
Sheriff.
Sheriff. That's the first trip for the sheriff. the sheriff will also be back in 24 hours. Their function is to keep the peace. They do not have anything to do with taking care of the unit and the personal property. There is a statute, it's 714, I never can remember the tail end of it, that says if the tenant, if a tenant vacates and does not take their personal property, the landlord has to give 15 days notice to the last known address for them to come get their personal property. Which means what? The odds are he's gonna send it to the address he's standing in. Because if they didn't leave a forwarding address, they meet requirement by sending it, it comes right back to the unit. And then they can basically take whatever their personal property is and throw it in the street. The garbage guy.
Or keep it.
Or keep it. You're talking probably 2 months
Yep.
for this process to fly.
60 days, yep.
And again, here's a place where the tenant or the landlord will be looking for help. And again, we may get a phone call. Can't help them.
Then why we need to know all that if we can discuss with them all? Just for information or?
Yeah.
Our protection. Because if we answer, I'm assuming if we answer the questions for them, we're in violation and now putting ourselves in jeopardy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right, unless the answer's right.
Well, even if the answer is right, we're not going to be guiding them through
Now,
what they.
the odds are, if your advice is accurate, nobody's gonna be coming after you. It's when one word is wrong, that now they come after you. So the conclusion is, I gotta stay out of the middle of that fight. Well, to answer your initial question, I have to know what I can and can't do if something like that happens. Because it's not just telling them to go talk to an attorney. I can talk to them about what's going on. I simply can't advise them as to what they should do. But I can pick up in the conversation that what they need to do is notify the landlord. It may be a simple matter of notifying the landlord, or putting them on written notice, so that they're forced to take some action. Or it might be more complicated than that, and they really need to sit down with an attorney and review the situation to figure out, because there's not one way to skin a cat. What we're trying to figure out in a given situation is what's the best way to handle it. See, there's where now the vice comes into play. There's when I suggest they could do this or do that. That's when I don't do that. That's when they need legal advice. And like I said, you know, we're building an inventory of professionals so that you have a resource to go to when somebody needs whatever they might need, whether it's an attorney or an inspector or a mold remediator or a lead-based paint remediator, because that's a different story. When you talk about lead-based paint, what they have to go through. Okay, let's go to chapter 8. I don't know why we use the word unit.
I got a question.
Hopefully I have an answer.
In page 161, it says that the tenant doesn't want to vacate the premise, even though when the sheriff is there.
Yeah.
They can stay 2 months, 1 month to 2 months, it said. It takes 1 month to 2 months to.
No, it's not about the eviction process. Not once you've got the eviction notice.
Yeah,
Once you have it, the landlord and the sheriff can remove them if they won't leave.
so what is the month and 2 months?
How long it takes from the time you start the process until the tenant's out of your unit. That's what the 1 to 2 months is that they're talking about. It's that whole eviction, the whole process. It's not saying that, they get another month. They may get another month. Because they have nowhere to go. So the courts might say that they stay 1 more month if they agree to pay the rent like they're supposed to, so they can find another location. Because as a landlord, I really want them in the unit, because I'm afraid what the unit's gonna look like when they leave, or what if they won't leave? See, that means if you're talking about going through an eviction process, as a landlord, you probably need legal advice. And there are plenty of law firms out there who specialize in this type of law. Anybody else? Okey dokey, let's go to Unit 8. Let's start on 166. Probably get my hands and no brain to part together.
You should make a board that you're talking, it's right for you.
No problem. We'll raise your commission to $1,000 each, and we can provide all that.
It's called Siri. Siri, what's the definition of home?
How many of you own property here in Florida? Okay, so this should be an easy check.
That's easy.
How many of you can show me the title to your property? Raise your hand if you can show me the title to your property. How many people say you can show me the title? Raise your hand.
Isn't that when it's?
So you can show me a bundle of rights. How do you prove that you own the property? By showing me the bundle of rights, or by showing me the instrument that conveyed those rights?
Instrument.
Because title is a legal bundle of rights, which means it's intangible. Now, where would I find what those rights are? In the statutes. Because all the terminology used in talking about estates initially had to be created through the statutes. So, what do we talk about first? Title or deed? Title. That's chapter 8. The deed is chapter 9. Now, these next 2 chapters probably will have a lot of terminology you would not be familiar with. Because now we're not in 475 anymore. We're in a state law now. So it's a whole different discussion here. Now, the obvious question is, why the hell do I need to learn about estates? Well, I spent 45 minutes showing the group that was training today why they need to do that. Ask a question. If you're taking a listing, do you need to be able to verify the owner of the property? And the type of ownership that they have?
Yes.
And where would I find that information? Okay, what document?
Deed?
The deed.
They are, through
So-
having, right, go to the floor, the auditor, pull it up.
Here's what you're gonna do, homework assignment. You're gonna go home. How many of you, whatever county you live in, I want you to go to the property appraiser's website. When you go down the list, part of it will talk about sales information, and it'll show you previous sales. And it gives you the book and page number of the official records where that deed is. I want you to click on that, and that'll take you to the deed. I want you to print the deed up. I want you to bring it with you. Because you paid $400,000 for a piece of paper and you don't have a clue what it says. Or you should have it at home,
Somewhere.
so you can just make a copy of it at home. You shouldn't have to go into the property appraiser. But you're gonna spend a lot of time in the property appraiser, because every time you do a transaction, the property appraiser and the deed are gonna come into play.
So you say go to property appraiser website, and then what's the next?
When you get there, you wanna, now, what you wanna do is, you wanna put in the address, and it will take you to the information about that given property. Once you're at that point, then there'll be a section where it talks about sales. Sales information. Obviously, you take the most recent one. If you click on, it's either gonna be a little magnifying glass, which is Palm Beach County, or you simply click on the book and page number, and it will take you actually to the clerk of the court. And the deed will pop up.
What's before the clerk of the court, wasn't that in my class?
No, the magnifying glass is at the property appraiser. That's the window to get over to the deed. Probably would be a good idea for everybody not to cheat and make a copy of the deed that you have at home. Here's an opportunity to learn something that you're gonna use a lot. And it's applicable to what we're doing in these 2 chapters. Or you can not do it and screw it up later.
So can you do that with any listing, or it has to be your own personal?
You can do any property you want.
Any property you want now.
So if you don't own a property, take a friend, take moms, take whoever.
And that's how you find it.
It'll be interesting to see the variety of actual deeds that show up. All right, so should have a little fun with that. Okay, on page 166, we've got 3 terms that they have given you definitions for. Land, real estate, and real property. Land is purely physical. estate is what?
Human improvement.
Oh, so land means unimproved.
It's man-made.
So land includes everything that God made.
Yes, nature, natural.
Man-made.
Man-made comes into play and when you get to real estate, because the human-made improvements is the difference between land and real estate. And then you hit real property. What's the difference between real estate and real property?
Bundle of rights.
The bundle of rights, thank you. Because they don't talk about the bundle of rights when they talk about real estate. It isn't until they say real property that the bundle of rights come into play. Okay, now, let me throw some wrench in the monkey. In the gray box, directly out of 475.01 is the definition of real property. But notice what it says, real property or real estate. Which means what?
Any bundle of rights or.
It means for our purposes, real estate and real property are interchangeable. The only time that you'd have to acknowledge the difference is if a question asked you to define real property or real estate. But as far as the use of it, you will see in a lot of places, it'll say real property or real estate, or real property and real estate. So in other words, as far as they're concerned, they are interchangeable. If I am selling mobile home lots, do I need a license? Yeah.
You're still selling land.
Yeah.
Do you have to have a license?
Yes.
If I'm renting mobile home lots, do I have to have a license?
No.
Why?
You say it's not for sale,
Why?
because they don't require it.
Why? Because cemetery lots are not considered real property.
You just said,
I thought you were talking about, you said.
you just said cemetery.
You said, but you started with mobile homes.
Yeah.
There's no mobile homes.
Well, we dealt with mobile home, I moved on to cemetery lots.
Oh, okay.
You know, catch up here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So, I'm a business broker. What kind of license do I have?
Real estate.
What kind?
Real estate.
Why?
Because real estate license
That's what's
covers
required.
business.
Because business enterprises or business opportunities are considered
Real estate.
real property. Therefore, you have to have a real estate license to broker them. On the next page, it talks about the physical components of land, surface, subsurface, and airspace. Technically, you own everything from the sky above to the center of the earth. So when you're going to the South 40, it's a long trip. And supposedly, we come out somewhere near China. Well, if you look at the shape of the earth and the location of those two countries, if you went from right here straight down or up, whichever way you're going, that's a good question. If I'm going to the center of the earth, am I going up or down?
It's still down.
They haven't had a movie about going to the center of the earth,
Oh, that came out in the,
I mean, like,
oh, they were dancing like the baby.
yeah, there were 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
Obviously, a topic that didn't go too far. Now, when you talk about physical components of land, you talk about the surface, it says it includes the land and water rights. There are 2 types of water rights: riparian rights and littoral. Which one would represent rivers?
Riparian.
How are you gonna remember that?
From the river.
With the
All
R.
right.
They are. And which one would represent lakes or large bodies of water? So the ocean would be littoral. Mississippi River,
Riparian.
flowing water. Creek.
Riparian.
That's all where you come from. That was a lot of streams, Coconuts is where I come from. When we would go to the store, but we were gonna go real quick and come back, we would say we're gonna slip to the store, we'll be right back. I never figured out what the hell slipping meant.
So now with the more with the drones, the activity with more drones and that nature, now there is a more pressing of air rights on your property.
Right. Right.
What about the intercoastal?
Intercoastal? No, I think we're there.
No, it's not, okay.
It is flowing.
Well, when, in time, okay, incoming and outgoing.
A star should be placed beside of riparian rights. That's on page 167, starts with line 3.
Now, if you're on a lake, does that give you rights to fish anywhere in that lake, or just?
It's whenever the restrictions that were placed on that property when it was time. Or local ordinances that control what you can and can't do with the property. In the gray box at the bottom of the page, there are 4 terms that relate to different types of activity when it comes to water. I would like for you to highlight those. There's no star. And then take a minute and read through them, because what I'm gonna ask you is the order of those 4 events. What happens first, second, third, fourth? Okay. What would happen first?
Accretion, or I wonder, yeah.
Let me ask you a question. In order for those different things to happen with the dirt and the rocks and stuff, they have to come from someplace, right? So that means what would have to happen first? Erosion.
So that's,
Because it's gotta come from somewhere. What happens next?
accretion.
Well, if you say accretion,
Relation.
it says there, the process of land
Build up.
buildup from waterborne rock, sand, and soil.
So new deposits.
Well, that water-bound rock, sand, and soil is what happens when erosion occurs. And so what would be the third part of this process? How do I know that?
New
Because
deposits.
it tells me.
New deposits.
It says new deposits of land as a result of accretion. Which means what happens next? Relation. I remember as a kid, I had relatives, aunts and uncles, who lived in Ohio. And one of them had a camp on one of the big rivers. I don't even remember which river it was now. But I remember when we first started going there, I could look all the way across the river. Now, in my mind, the river was like 45 miles wide. It may be a stream for all I know. But each time I went there, I noticed that it became more difficult to see the other side from where I was standing. Because what was happening? The buildup. The last time I was there was an island there with trees on it. There's the reliction. Because what happens as all that builds up and trees start growing? What's it do to the
retains
water?
the soil.
Pushes it away. And then some act like winter ice or stuff could come along and do what? Erode it. And could start the process. It's like the Mississippi River or the Delta. That process is in a constant state of change. Constantly moves. I never realized that the Mississippi River was a snake. If you've ever flown over the Mississippi River near where the Delta is, the river doesn't go straight up and down. It curves, it snakes. Never realized that. I had to go out to Oakland to do an interview for a job with a real estate company. And they flew me out from Fort Lauderdale. First thing we did was fly over the Everglades. And then we went up the coast and made a hard left and went over the Mississippi River, and then they landed. They had to make one stop before they got to Oakland, and they stopped in Mars. I'm sorry, I mean Phoenix. But the color of the ground in that part of the country looks like Mars looks like.
So this is the natural.
So now we know that nobody went to the moon or Mars or anywhere because they just filmed it. But think about how many different types of topography exist within this country. And the contrast, take South Florida to Phoenix. It's like two different worlds. phenomenal. The Appalachian Mountains versus the Rockies,
Oh,
totally different.
totally different. Yeah, one is greener like crazy.
Do you know why the Blue Ridge Mountains are blue? They have that bluish green color? Because they were full of minerals and chalk. And those minerals and chalks gave them pigment.
Right.
That's why the mountains are the color they are. Because they used to have chalk mines in the mountain, or on the side, on the Shenandoah Valley side of the mountain. And there are big pits on the mountain where they used to dig out the chalk. And they're turquoise. It's why.
Limestone.
Yep. Limestone, a lot of limestone.
So when 95 was building that new, ramp,
Mm-hmm.
and it was man-made, and then the limestone, appeared, what would that be considered? That's not a natural process.
Right. So it wouldn't fit this is not man-made, you know.
Correct.
But that's like, with the Mississippi River and the Delta, that is constantly changing. The boats have to be careful, because one path was great last year. Unfortunately, everything moved from the other side to that side, and now all of a sudden, the channels have changed. But they love playing with this riparian rights versus littoral rights. You know that if they ask a question about them, you're gonna answer riparian. Why? Because it has a star and littoral doesn't. Have you forgotten what the star means? So questions like that, if you get those wrong, you probably should be beat. You know they're gonna play the two against each other, and you know I put the star, unless I'm just fooling you and giving you stars that aren't the right ones, and you should be beat. It's one thing you have to remember, I have the red pen. I control your future. And if this was high school, or elementary school, I wouldn't be allowed to use that red pen,
Get him first.
Yep.
because it's degrading.
Mhm.
You don't wanna get me started with that.
I use purple now.
Purple.
Yep.
I probably wouldn't last more than a week or two, I need to be stabbed and fired.
I said red is the color of failure.
Right, I use purple.
Purple. It's a good color.
Purple provides positive feedback.
Yeah. Got a few purples. I'm a walking billboard.
Yep.
If you had your license right now, how many of you would I know was in the business? By looking at you?
Sure.
Zero. You should be a walking billboard. Now, because we have name badges and things, you've seen the type of thing. I've had people say that they wouldn't wear stuff like that. Then I told them that they need to go home, they need to go in their closet, and they need to pull out every top that has a horse on it,
Right.
and throw it away.
Right.
Because if you wouldn't wear, see, you realize that you're advertising for that fool.
That's right. That's right.
Every time you put on one of their apparels, you're advertising for that guy, so he makes more billions. And you spend billions. But you wouldn't wear a name badge. I don't know. It's just people don't want to wear it. And that very person, guess what? Next day they come in with what? A horse. Okay. Let's move over to page 168. And let's go to the bottom of the page. It says real property versus real estate. How do they define, I'm sorry, it's real property versus personal property. Somehow it didn't sound right. Give me the definition for personal property.
Improvements.
I didn't ask for example, I asked for definition.
Property.
Is it immovable?
Anything that's not real property is personal property. Because we don't have a definition for personal property. Because your English teacher would have a stroke if you described personal property as being something that's not real property. The reason for that is 475 defines real estate or real property. So if it doesn't fit that definition, then it's personal property. Then there's property that may have started out personal, but is now real. They are called fixtures. Your air conditioning unit sitting in the garage is personal property. When they take it outside and install it and plug it into the system, it's a fixture. So a fixture isn't just referring to lights. Would you agree that this is a topic for wars in contracts?
Yep.
Because one person is saying, no, it's part of the real property, it's a fixture, it should stay. The other person is saying what? No, it's personal property, and it's gotta go. Which means the contract and/or addendum to the contract should clearly do what?
Define what.
Define what's what.
Personal property.
But how would the courts handle a dispute over personal property versus real property? If you'll notice on the next page where it talks about fixtures, it talks about 4 ways of figuring out whether it's a fixture or not. The first one is what? Intent of the parties. Where do I find that? On the contract. The second one says relationship between the parties. A lease would be a good example of that. The third one is what?
Method or degree of attachment.
Okay. I have a portable air conditioning unit. I open the window, I slide it in the window, I close the window, I open the louvers to create a seal. I plug it into the wall and turn it on. That would normally be considered personal property or fixture?
Personal.
Personal property. Take the same unit, go below the window, cut a hole in the window, put the unit in, frame around it, and plug it in
It's now fixture.
because of the way it was attached to the property. And the last one is what?
Adaptation.
Adaptation of the article. For example, you got a gas station that's being sold. Are the pumps personal property? Are they a fixture?
Fixture.
It depends on what the intent is for the property. If the intent is to tear down the gas station and build a 10-story office building, those pumps
Gotta come out.
are not gonna be fixtures.
For the impact.
Or, probably a better example, the pumps belong to Mobile. The owner was only leasing them. So that means that in the deal, if I'm buying that property and I want to use it as a gas station, I better make sure I clearly identify whether it's going to stay or not. And the intent of what the property is will have an impact on it. If you want to use it as a gas station, more likely that you're going to win the argument over whether it's personal property, which the owner, previous owner can take, or it's a fixture. Under the, relationship of the parties, take a beauty salon. What about the sinks and the chairs?
Chairs are personal property, the sinks and the fixtures.
Personal property.
Well, let me ask you a question. The chairs are used in conduct of business,
Right.
Right.
okay? That makes them,
Trade fixture.
it's a trade fixture, which means it goes with the tenant.
What about different space?
Because they needed that to do their business. If they're just moving to a different location, they need all that.
Equipment.
So if it pertains specifically to the function of what that tenant's gonna be doing, that will dictate, unless indicated otherwise in the lease, of whether it's considered a fixture, which means that they would have to leave it when they left, when they decided to move, or they could take it with them if it's personal property. So that tells us that in contracts, let's go back to the first one, intent of the parties. What would the judge want to see in regard to intent of the parties?
The contract?
The contract. And what's the judge looking for?
The terms, the addendums, the terms?
Specific information to determine the intent of the parties when it comes to property, personal property.
Items listed as real property, or items listed as otherwise.
Let me ask a question. How many of you have bought a property here in the last 2-3 years? Okay. Well, my question is this to you. Did the contract indicate what stayed and didn't stay when it came to personal property?
Yeah,
What page was it on?
I don't know what page,
So how can you be sure it was there?
because
Has it?
I did read it. I just don't remember what
It's
page.
the first page.
Okay, I just don't remember what page it was on.
And here's that, something else, a little thing you put in your hat, so we can down a little bit here, you can use it. The washer and dryer used to be considered a fixture and was listed on the contract as staying with the property. And then last year, they decided that washers and dryers were personal property. So unless you indicated on the contract that the washer and dryer stayed, the seller could walk away with it.
What about if they get swapped out with like the cheapest of cheap? Wash.
Why am I gonna change it?
In this scenario.
Well, let me finish
Sorry.
mine before you hit me with a new one. I'll have to go to hers, because now I forgot mine.
Are you talking about,
Just because it was.
oh, washers and dryers?
Oh, right.
They have full size and all this other stuff.
So unless that contract specifically states that washer and dryer go, don't. Now I let's tie her problem into it. It does say washer and dryer,
Right.
but the washer and dryer are the ones they went to Habitat Restore and bought to replace the $2,000 units that were there.
Unless it's specified. If it's not specified.
It depends what they saw.
Well, the contract said washer and dryer.
You have to be more specific if you want.
Take a picture of it.
It would depend what they saw.
Doesn't matter, washer and dryer,
Should specify.
washer and dryer, if you need to you just buy a washer and dryer a month ago, and then you sell your place, and you have a brand new washer and dryer, I'm gonna take that with me and replace it.
No, you're not, because I'm not buying the house without it.
Okay, so someone else will.
Okay, good. So you spend another 2 or 3 months paying rent, paying mortgage, and insurance, and all that other stuff. Or we change the contract where I get that washer and dryer. Pick one. It's gonna cost you more money. You go buy new ones. They probably won't fit in your new house anyhow.
And the contract.
Or you take the old ones in the garage. Take the old ones in the garage.
This is an area, people, that is critical in this business. More fights have happened in real estate transactions over the very topic that we're talking about now. And the only way I can keep it from turning into World War III is to have it in black and white. And pictures. To me, I take two types of pictures. I take one to sell the property. The other to identify what stays and doesn't. So they can't play switcheroo. Now, I got to be careful, I get off on a contract discussion, I gotta do that tomorrow. How about the recessed lighting? Is that a fixture?
Yes.
Yes.
Or personal property that can be removed? Now, again, we know that the contract probably specifically identifies lighting fixtures. Does that include bulbs? Contract says lighting fixtures.
Probably not.
Does that include bulbs?
No, it doesn't say bulbs.
Answer is no. Why? Well, when you bought it and opened the box, did it have bulbs in it?
Nope.
Okay.
Who's gonna take the bulbs?
I am, because the bulbs are special LED bulbs that are $10 a piece, and I got 14 in the house. So guess what? I'll leave you the little stick that I use to take it down. What I'm trying to figure out is I have 20-foot ceilings. I have a 4-foot stick. And I'm almost 6 feet, so that's 10. I have to figure out how to get to the other. Maybe I'll just leave them. So that he has to replace all of them when they blow out.
A ladder and then the 4-foot stick.
Yeah. And my daughter's house, new house, the ceilings, at highest was 16 feet. And this guy had to hang a chandelier. It was, and he did something interesting. You know how when you put it up like a fan or you hook it on the thing at top? What he did was, he opened the chain up and left about that much chain. And he did everything in the ceiling, and then he brought the fixture up and just hooked it back together. Rather than trying to bring the fixture all the way up to where it would have to be hooked in. I thought that was, a very different way of doing it. Looked like it made it a lot easier to do it. So he basically took the top part of it and put it in. So the little cup was covering the hole, the chain's coming down. And so all he has to do is bring the fixture up to there, hook it back in. Which was a whole lot easier than trying to deal with it at the ceiling.
Oh, yeah.
And the thought of being 16 feet in the air, trying to hang on to something like that, didn't really excite me. What about an area rug? What about wall-to-wall carpeting?
That's
That's probably gonna be considered a fixture. To give you an example of what could happen, one of the agents had a listing, and in the middle of the living room was a very expensive rug. And it was indicated that the rug did not stay, that the summer was gonna take it. So, walkthrough comes up, furniture's been removed, and there was no tile where the carpet was.
SOL.
Wait a minute, that would be a material fact. That wouldn't obviously have been readily observable. So the buyer's got a potential argument over that. Oh. So if something doesn't totally cover the floor, wall to wall, I don't assume what's underneath them.
Check.
Yeah.
You wanna check or you wanna ask, or both. See, you understand that every time you use the word assume, you just think of ching ching out of your pocket. Because you realize I'm supposed to be the one making sure that these people don't get in trouble. That I'm making sure that things are clear as to what stays and what doesn't.
And that's done through the walkthrough.
Well, the walkthrough is the last chance. Because that's usually just prior to closing, either the day of or the day before.
But you definitely want to make sure that.
Yeah, because I want to make sure I verify everything's still there.
If you're working with the seller, and you're asking like information, if you're going to the house, that make sure you're aware of the situation and everything you can see, and you ask them about like what's under the rug, and they say, yeah, it's fine, is it your duty to also look underneath and check?
I would.
Okay,
Yeah.
and if they're non-compliant with that, how would you?
I mean, in other words, you found out there was no tile under there.
Or they're like, they're not willing to, for whatever reason.
If they're not willing to let me see what's there, there's a reason for it.
Okay.
And so as the listing agent or the seller, that should have been
Red flag.
disclosed. Not that you can't sell it that way and take the rug. You just have to tell them what as is. There's an example of telling them what as is.
I'll tell them to leave the rug, or I ain't buying the house.
Well, you can tell them anything.
They're not gonna be approved.
But when I pick it, have my movers pick it up and take it to the truck, you better not be on my property, I have the sheriff there. So I have to be smart enough as an agent to avoid all those situations, to make sure that everybody's on the same page, as they say. And I'm going home. I will see you Monday, I guess.
Have a good one.
Oh, thank you. You somebody remember.
I